Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'm discussing my thoughts on episode 9 of the anime series 3D Kanojo Real Girl. And if I'm honest, this episode, it becomes utmost apparent to me that they must be padding out this story. I was already sort of getting a sense of that with the previous episode, which was wholly frustrating to me. If you watched my previous episode discussion video, I don't even remember at this point everything that I, talked about the previous episode. But I do still have this overhanging sense that I was very much frustrated by it, that there wasn't a whole hell of a lot, held over as far as being impactful in the characterization or the plotting, anything like that. And I think I was just wholly frustrated by that episode, and it was the first inkling that I got that really where they're aiming to go in this story, they probably could have gotten there a little bit earlier, maybe 8 to 10 episodes rather than the 11 or 12 that I think is the length of this series, something like that. Whatever it happens to be, I think they could have probably gotten to their end game in a shorter span of time than we're actually chugging along, that kind of thing. And this episode, it was by and large not nearly as exacerbating as the previous episode was for me. This one gets it a little bit more back on point, but that's not really saying a whole hell of a lot. I think the most frustrating aspect to this episode is Satsui's sort of self-defeatist point of view. His constantly blaming himself. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Everything's falling apart because of me, because I'm too stupid and all this kind of stuff, which I've gone through that in my own life. I have experienced that self-doubt, that self-consciousness, that self-hate even to a degree. But they're really banging it on the head with this episode. And the thing, it's not so much the act of his feeling that way or being depicted feeling that way that is the most frustrating. The thing that is the most frustrating is how everyone around him is reacting to it. I was trying to sort of empathically equate aspects of my own experiences in life to try to spell out, wrap my mind around where Satsui's coming from as an outcast, an otaku, a nerd, keeps to himself for most of his life, socially inept and everything like that. And the closest I came was an experience I had not too long ago as of the time of this video, where I met a girl and the impression I was getting was maybe she was interested in me, that kind of thing. Of course, because she's a complete and total stranger, like a clerk at a store, it makes it that much harder to really investigate whether or not there is any interest. What am I going to do? Walk into the store and walk up to her and say, oh, were you digging on me? Like, you want to go out sometime? It's kind of a really awkward, frustrating scenario, So I equate sort of what Satsui's going through along those lines as far as that lack of, communicative back and forth, where he feels like he really can't necessarily put forth his thoughts and emotions, his feelings, his confusion, even though you would think it should be that much easier for this group of characters to commingle because they all know each other. They're all friends. They're already, well communicative with each other to a point. But then, of course, the other drops side of the argument where there's only so much you can really read into what another person is thinking or feeling or experiencing. It doesn't really matter how long you've known them, how well you think you know them. And a lot of that falls to the other person. A lot of the frustration that I gain out of this series is the fact that Satsui is the only one who seems to be self-aware of his own failings, even though he doesn't quite know how to fix things, and that's because nobody will tell him shit. Pardon my French. But Iroha, the whole time, she needs to be communicative with him. Ishino, of all characters, actually pointed this out to her, I think it was in the previous episode, that you need to express yourself. You need to come clean. You need to be open and honest with Satsui. If you feel a level of jealousy and frustration in his interacting with Aido and everything like that, you kind of need to nip it in the bud before it expounds and before her interest in him grows and she makes a move. And that's where we land with this episode. She builds up her courage, even to Ito's frustration now that he's having a burgeoning interest in Ayato as well, which he then blames Tsutsui for. Everyone's blaming Tsutsui, and there's only so much involvement that he has in all of this. Granted, he is a guilty party, but so is everyone else, and they're all kind of obtuse to that fact. They're all kind of just laying their stake on blaming him. I think the entirety of the previous episode fell back. I think this was a point I made in my video discussing it. It entirely fell back on blaming Tsutsui for everything. Everything is only falling apart singularly because of Tsutsui's involvement and his obtuseness, his social ineptability. And it's like, shut the F up. No, it's not. It's everybody. Everybody is being problematic. Iroha is not coming clean, not expressing herself, not being truthful with him about how she feels. Now, some part of that is probably related to her own anxieties and everything like that. She opens up to, of all people, Mitsuya on the school rooftop in this episode to say, I'm thinking all these things, I'm feeling all these things, and she doesn't quite know how to express those things because of her fears and anxieties. It's the first time she's ever experienced this infatuation with someone where she wants to constantly have their respect, and she doesn't want to do anything to undermine that. She wants to be loved for who she is, as she lays claim that she loves and feels for Tsutsui, for him, who he is, how he is, and everything like that. But they there's a very sort of minced words approach to how they're gauging their thoughts and feelings in this series, which goes back to Japanese anime anyway. There's a lot of philosophical debate about emotions and making memories and what those memories, account for and how they equate in our lives and our youth and whatever like that. There's a lot of really philosophical discussion in the approach to how we think, do, and say things, or at least as far as the Japanese culture does in its anime. And so she's kind of scrutinizing herself in a way to say, I love him and I want to confide in him and I want to trust him, but I don't even really understand my own reluctance to do so. If it's something I want, why can't I just be forward with it? Why can't I be open with it as easily as I want to be, and then here comes Ayato, who's making eyes at this guy that I like, and I'm jealous over that. I don't want him interacting with her or being kind to her. I mean, they sort of make it out in the dialogue like you can't be kind to anyone. If we're in a group or we're a boyfriend, girlfriend, don't ever smile at anyone else. Don't ever be nice to anyone else. When what they're really saying is, they're jealous over the idea that someone else could potentially steer them away, or take them away. It's never quite straightforward. And I guess a lot of that has to do with the actual upbringing in Japan for youths and things like that. I can only imagine, not growing up on that side of the earth, Suffice to say, it's frustrating to me, even Ito in this episode, who I've felt sympathetic toward. The other leg finally drops when he realizes that Ayato made good on her promise to him as they both left to go to the hospital from the cabin, that she was going to confess her feelings for Tsutsui. And when he finds out that she did this, he is utmost pissed off at Tsutsui for running away. Not so much pissed off at Tsutsui. It's more so born out of his wanting to stick up for Ayato, this girl that he now realizes he has an infatuation with, an interest in, and he doesn't want to see her heartbroken. And even if he doesn't get to be the guy that is with her, any guy that might be with her, especially if it's my best friend that she chooses over me, he better not break her heart. He wants to stick up for her and wants to be there for her, And again, it's frustrating because I'm watching an anime. As an observer of characterization and plotting, it is poorly plotted. It is being padded out. They're taking a much slower pace than needs to be taken especially for a group that is already friends, that are already familiar with each other. They should be able to be a little bit easier at coming clean and talking things out, at least in my own personal estimation, you know. It doesn't matter how obtuse Setsui is. It doesn't matter how internalized and reluctant Iroha is to express herself. It doesn't matter that Ayato has, you know, sort of a unsavory want to break Iroha and Setsui apart for her own selfish, you know, interests in Setsui. It doesn't matter that Ito is pissed off at Setsui for very nearly turning his back on Ayato and breaking her heart and crushing her under his running away and all this stuff. All of these things, like, I get where it's coming from, but it just, it could be told so much more effectively. It could be told much more satisfactory than it thus far is being doled out, you know, as a plot, as a characterization of all these different characters, whatever. I didn't have as much of a problem with this episode animation-wise. I spoke about that over the last couple of episodes, I think, that the animation was a little wonky and weird close-ups and things, probably cost-saving endeavors in the animation department, where things were just looking crappy as all hell. It was a little bit better in this episode, a little bit more on point to where it was prior to the previous two episodes. But still nothing spectacular. You know, I'll never claim that this series was just eyegasms aplenty. But yeah, you know, this episode, it was not as frustrating as the previous, but it was still frustrating. And I can only hope that the sort of tip of the hat they leave this episode off with, that Setsui is going to seek out Ayato. And according to his dialogue, the impression is he wants to confess his love for Iroha and turn Ayato down. And he's mulling over, you know, how is this going to go? And we're all going to have to wait and see for the next episode. And hopefully, you know, this snail's pace, padding it out sort of storytelling approach to all of this will hasten up and we'll actually get somewhere. We can only hope, right? So anyway, until the next one, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. If this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.